the final 24 hours of death row's most controversial woman. She was once called the death row sweetheart, a title that softened none of the facts but complicated everything about her legacy. Carla Fay Tucker was no ordinary prisoner. Convicted of a brutal double homicide in 1983, she had been painted as a heartless killer. But behind prison walls, something changed. She turned to faith, became a model inmate, and inspired a nationwide debate on redemption, justice, and whether true transformation could or should alter a death sentence. In the final 24 hours of her life, Karla showed no fear. She fasted, prayed, wrote letters of peace, and delivered apologies with a steady voice. She was the first woman executed in Texas in over a century. But was she the same person who had committed those crimes today? We walk through the final day of Carla Fay Tucker's life, a haunting, emotional journey that challenges what we think we know about punishment, mercy, and the human soul. Dear friends, Carla Fay Tucker's story isn't just a chronicle of crime and punishment. It's a complex, human tale that forces us to examine what redemption truly means. As February 6, 1998 dawned cold and clear over Huntsville, Texas, the final hours of Karla's life began ticking down. She had been flown in earlier that morning from the Mountain View unit, where she had spent the better part of her sentence. Her new home was a cell just a few steps from the infamous execution chamber, a place that had claimed hundreds of lives, but not one like hers in decades. Unlike many death row inmates who meet their end in a fog of sedation or silence, Karla approached her final day with startling clarity and purpose. At 38 years old, she had become the center of a national conversation. Not because she claimed innocence she didn't, not because she denied her violent past she couldn't, but because in the 15 years since that horrific night in 1983, something had undeniably changed. Back then, she and her boyfriend, Danny Garrett, broke into the home of Jerry Lynn Dean in a drug-fueled frenzy. A burglary spiraled into a savage attack. Karla used a pickaxe. She later claimed she reached a kind of ecstasy with each blow. That quote would haunt her for years. But in prison, Karla confronted her guilt head-on. She found religion, sobered up, and committed herself to faith and service behind bars. To some, she became a symbol of transformation. To others, it was too little, too late. At the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, protocol ruled everything on execution day. Karla was watched around the clock, her final movements carefully scheduled. She fasted in the lead-up to her execution partly as an act of spiritual discipline, partly as quiet protest. That morning, her husband Dana Brown, whom she had married by proxy, visited her behind a glass wall. Their connection was strong, forged through shared faith and a belief in second chances. Dana urged her to eat something, and she nibbled on crackers, washing them down with a bit of soda. For 4 emotional hours, she visited with him, her father, and her sister. They laughed at moments, cried in others. A prison spokesman later said she remained upbeat until the very end of the visit. But her sister Carrie later described the goodbye as heartbreaking. Around 1:00 p.m., Karla was moved to the holding cell adjacent to the execution chamber. Though the walk was short, protocol required that she be transported by armored van. She arrived to find her final meal waiting for her, a simple banana, a peach, and a tossed salad with ranch dressing. It was a quiet, humble choice, reflecting perhaps the humility she had fought to reclaim. Inside the holding cell, Karla spent the final hours writing letters. They weren't angry or pleading. They were filled with messages of hope, sorrow, and forgiveness. In one, she wrote, "I know people want me to be a monster, but what if the monster you're looking for doesn't exist anymore?" Cheryl Archer, the women's staff chaplain and one of Karla's closest confidants, arrived around 3:30 p.m. The corridors of Huntsville were cold and echoing, yet Karla greeted her with a soft smile. They sat on the floor, hands intertwined through the bars. Cheryl read a final update from Karla's lawyer. All legal efforts had failed. Even the Supreme Court had denied her one last appeal. Governor George W. Bush, under immense national pressure, confirmed that the execution would proceed. He stated, "The courts, including the U.S., Supreme Court, have thoroughly reviewed the case, and I will not intervene." As Karla took in the news, she remained composed. She asked Cheryl to tell the other inmates to forgive the system and to remember that justice should never become revenge. "I don't fear dying," she said. "What I fear is a world that can't see the difference." At approximately 6:20 p.m., she showered and changed into the white prison uniform required for execution. Her long hair was still damp as she walked, unassisted, into the execution chamber. She lay down on the gurney and allowed the guards to strap her in legs, arms, and chest as medical personnel struggled to find a usable vein. She whispered, "Lord Jesus, help them find my vein." Once the IV was secured, she turned her head toward the witness chamber. There, separated by glass, were her sister Carrie, her husband Dana, her friend Jackie, and Ronald Carlson, the brother of one of her victims. Carlson had become a vocal opponent of her execution, stating that he had come to believe in her transformation and that killing her would not bring his sister back. In another room, Richard Thornton, Deborah's husband, watched with his children. He whispered to the screen, "Here she comes, baby doll. She is all yours," believing that justice was finally being served. Karla's voice was soft but steady. "I want to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, I'm so sorry. I hope God gives you peace with this." She turned to Dana and said, "Baby, I love you. Everyone has been so good to me. I love you all very much. I'm going to be face to face with Jesus now." Then, looking toward the warden, she added, "Warden Baggett, thank you. You've been so good to me. I'll wait for you." She had no fear, no bitterness, just peace. At 6:37 p.m., the execution began. The 3-drug cocktail sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride entered her system. Within minutes, she sighed twice, then released a soft groan, her body stilled. At 6:45 p.m., she was declared dead. She was 38 years old. Witnesses say she died with a smile on her face. Eyes turned to the ceiling, as though looking at something far beyond the sterile walls of the execution chamber. Maybe she was. Carla Fay Tucker became the first woman executed in Texas since 1863. But she was also the first to challenge, so publicly, what that punishment meant. Was she a monster beyond redemption, or a woman who proved that people can change? That's a question we'll all have to answer in our own hearts. As the sun set over Huntsville on February 3, 1998, the chapter of Carla Fay Tucker's life came to a quiet and resolute close. Her final hours were not filled with fear or bitterness, but with grace, remorse, and love. She did not deny her crimes, but she did plead for the world to see the person she had become. Not just the person she once was. Her words, her faith, and her actions in those final moments left a lasting impression on all who witnessed them. Whether one believes justice was served or mercy was denied, Karla's execution sparked a national conversation about redemption, forgiveness, and the death penalty's reach. In death, she became more than a headline, she became a symbol, for better or worse, of the complex human stories that exist behind prison walls. And as her final breath left her body, she faced the end with a soft smile. Leaving behind a haunting question, can people truly change?